But then there's a lot of people that know that stuff. Like I said, I mean, have you seen like the Great Awakening map?
Yeah, I'm on it.
You are? Oh, you are? Yeah. Cool. Okay.
I'm in there.
I'm going to go look. We have it hung up in my husband's office.
They spelled my name with a Z.
Did they really?
They spelled Tony Rodrigues.
Okay.
It's in the secret space
You're
program.
On that. Okay, I'm going to go look. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a huge map, right? But I think like Corey Good and all those people are on there too. Yeah. And it's just like.
I'm in there.
Okay, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, like, I mean, I'm a human, so there's like a small part of me that's like skeptical of this stuff because I've never seen it. But then most of me is like, also, it's not proven, and like it's so freaking huge out there. How could there not be more? And then when I keep talking to different people that have different experience and psychic abilities, I'm like, that's data in itself. Like, how many coincidences, how many stories can you keep like pushing out, you know?
Well, and what we're seeing nowadays is they tip the powers that be have tipped their hands.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing how easily they can hide information.
Totally.
They're hiding things, and now we see it. We go, wait a minute, that was info we know for sure. So that's really what's been going on with all of the ESP and the psychic phenomena and the ETs. Like, they've been hiding it all along. We just were oblivious to it because everything else was clipping along just fine.
Yeah.
So like you said, data, and it would be weird if you weren't skeptical.
Yeah. I mean, it's
right. If you didn't experience it yourself or see something, and then somebody told you that, hey, there's ETs that come in your house, they can teleport in and they take you, it would be weird if you weren't skeptical. Totally. So it's keep that,
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with it. Like, if you have skeptic questions, please hit me with them because I'm totally, it's hard for me. I want to have a skeptic on my show just for that, just because it's a good way to boil down information. Yeah. But you can't get a skeptic that's not angry.
Totally. Yeah.
Once you present a few things, they just want to fight you, and it's not. It devolves.
Totally. Hey everybody, welcome to Lauren.live, Spirituality, Health, and Lifestyle Podcast. I have Tony Rodrigues with me. What's up, Tony?
Hi. Hi, Lauren. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So you guys, this topic is juicy. It's controversial. I think it's fascinating. I've had some different guests on previously on my earlier shows about UFOs, aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call it, out of this world experiences, abductions. So today's story is wild. Tony is it said it on your website, secret space experiencer. So we're going to get into what that is. A lot of people don't know what that is, secret space program. But basically, I'm going to just let you tell your story because it's so crazy and wild.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. And when you explain it to people in a format, like this, when I just put it even in a nutshell, it sounds so crazy, but it really, the longer that you listen to what I've been through and the way that things have boiled down, the more intriguing it is. And, a lot of people that have been skeptical, it's like, they just don't listen to the whole story. Mm-hmm. And so believe me, I looked for every way out after I got had the big recall of memories, and I looked for every way out of this and say that maybe there was something else, but essentially, branches of certain governments and of mankind have been dealing with extraterrestrials for over 100 years and have traded technology. And we're talking about very advanced technologies, life extension, time travel. There's where you lose everybody immediately, is like time travel. Mm-hmm. There are time travel aspects of it. When you travel great distances in space, you can also travel great distances of time. And life extension, and they have begun to build out. We have colonies throughout our solar system and nearby stars. We have probably hundreds of colonies. And they started taking people back as early as the 30s and 40s. And in the 60s, they really took people. And then now the early ones have had children up there. So we're talking about millions of people that are in established colonies in the secret space program. Something like 10.5 million people living on Mars underground in bases throughout. I was taken into not the space program in the beginning. I was taken for a separate reason by people that had access to the life extension tech, and it was more of a punishment. And I was sold from black program to black program for the first 6 or 7 years. And so that really you know, I hate to use the word blessing in disguise, but in my instance of coming forward, it was a blessing in disguise because I had tangible evidence of places on Earth that I had intimate knowledge with, and people and places that most people that go into these programs get whisked straight off the world. So when they get their memories back, there's no real reference point for them to prove when or where they were. So I had the first few, I think it was 7.5, 8 years that I was on Earth. And so I was able to substantiate what I remembered. I got I had an MRI scan done on my head in 2015, end of April. And then in May, a couple of weeks later of 2015, I had huge chunks of memory recall happen. Other people that have come forward about the same subject matter have said the same thing. Michael Ralph from the Mars records. And there have been other people, but basically it was, I looked back when I found out, and I had medical records, and I went, wow, what a coincidence. Right before my memories came back, I did get an MRI scan of my head. So maybe that had something to do with it.
Like
maybe not.
The magnetic something. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. I do remember the process of when they were deleting the memories. And it wasn't just a one and done. It wasn't just like a surgery or any kind of one treat. They didn't give you a pill and then you forgot your memories. There was an industrial process that took a few days where we would sit at one station and they would work on, you would forget the faces and they would delete that, using a combination of drugs and hypnosis, like an industrial grade hypnosis. And then the next thing with names, you would forget names, and then you would forget, shapes, and then they would put screen memories. They wanted, so every time you thought of a spaceship, you'd think of something else. And that process went on, and I was combative during that time. I did not want to forget what I had achieved in the program. And so I was combative during that time. And maybe that helped me remember, I think that in my instance, there was a kind of a perfect storm of things that went on for me to remember what happened, because definitely most people, something like 98% of people don't have memory recall. Sure. of being taken and serving in these programs. Wow. And so, and I haven't explained it, like you said, explain it for the audience. If they didn't know, what they do is they take people in 20-year increments. And that
sorry
is something
to interrupt you, but just, I know your story, but maybe people don't even know who's they. So when you were, was it 10?
I was 10.
So yes. When you were 10, this happened. So you were abducted, taken by ETs?
Yes.
Okay. And then you were taken, where were you taken?
So I was flagged by humans that have access to these programs. And the relationship is as such where the ETs were, I hate to put words in the mouth, but seemingly the ETs were subcontracting under a government agency or a private owned agency high in the government, like a black agency. Sure. And I was flagged by people in my real life in Michigan. I lived in southern Michigan, and there were people, the kid in my class said, "My dad's an Illuminati. What's your dad do?" And it was them that flagged me. And when I was introduced to his father and they talked about it in school, then it was the next night that I was taken. I woke up with a gray ET and a couple of reptiles in my room, and they took me, and I immediately, instantaneously was transported to a laboratory, and they ran tests on me, and then they did a procedure, and I woke up with amnesia. I had no memory. When the 20 years began, I had no memory of where I was from, who I was, my mom or dad or anything. So I had amnesia, and then I lived for 20 years and being traded from program to program. They told me, you're being sold to another program. And so that's what happened over 20 years. And then eventually, when I was about, 16, so it was about 6 years on Earth, 16, I think I was, when they sold me. The exact verbiage was they were selling me to the military, and they sold me off to the space program. I went to the backside of the moon to a base there and was trained for combat, like a support soldier role, and then on to Mars, which is, like I said, there's something like 10 million people on Mars. Yes. And pretty established base. There's quite a bit of underground bases that are built that are not visible from orbit. They're underground. And it was a very short time that program got canceled, and I was retrained, sent to a bigger city, given aptitude tests, retrained, and sold off to the Ceres Colony Corporation. Ceres is a small dwarf planet in between Mars and the asteroid belt, and I lived there for better part of 12 years working on. And so that's a post World War II breakaway of the Deutsch culture from World War II, the Nazi Germans, and they went there. They made treaties with extraterrestrials and were given that domain of that area and many other colonies. But that was a well-established one from back in that time, like an older colony. Mm-hmm. And I ended up working as maintenance on ships and then cargo engineer on ships doing interstellar and in fact intergalactic trade missions. Like we were doing cargo and trading for the Ceres Colony Corporation, goods for tech and tech for goods.
Oh my gosh.
It's a mouthful. I know. So it's a mouthful.
I mean, I sit here, like I told you before we started recording, and I'm just like, this sounds freaking sociopathic psycho, right? But I will say the reason I have you on the show, 1, I'm open-minded. 2, it's an interesting story. 3, as weird as it is, it's also not weird because we have no idea all the crazy stuff that's out there. I mean, you do, but like a lot of us have never had this stuff happen. But I've talked to so many different people, mediums, spiritual people, which we're going to get into the spiritual aspect. One of the mediums that I work with for over a year helped me with all kinds of crazy stuff, opening up my chakras, stuff that I've seen weird colors and chakra. Even people think that stuff's weird, right? If you haven't experienced something, it's weird. That's fine and it's normal to be skeptical, but until you've experienced something, maybe don't judge as much, right? But she told me that she was taken as a child up into space and they were taking biopsies of their arms. They're very interested in our DNA and different things. And then I've had Sherry Weil on the show and they were interested in harvesting her ovaries. They're very interested in the reproductive system, right? Because they may need to use that later for various reasons. So I guess for me, I've heard it from so many different people that it's starting to feel kind of a little more normal. And so I guess I just encourage people, like if this isn't resonating with you, no worries. Like we're not here to change your mind, but if you are interested, hear us out, hear Tony out. And I just encourage you to listen. I just think Star Wars is not as weird as you guys might think. It's probably way more accurate, right? That's what Sherry Weil said. There were some scenes in there where she's like, those beings, she's seen them in her house. So I know this sounds bizarro. I just want to acknowledge it, but I still think it's a fascinating conversation. And there are proof, there are things that you had said to me. You had been brought to a house in Seattle during this 20-year period, and then you were able to actually truly see the house in real person and prove it. So this is the kind of stuff that's like, okay, like you've got my attention.
So I was in denial.
Yeah.
Right? So my wife, when I got my memories back in 2015, my wife was like, she's grown up as, a small town Christian upbringing, and her attitude towards AETs was, well, if there were aliens, they'd be in the Bible.
Yeah.
So she didn't believe in any of it. So I was kind of totally processing all this. Like you got to understand that I always had the memories. They didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. They're different than dreams. A lot of people process memories as dreams that don't make sense like this. A lot of people because since I've come public in 2016, I've worked with thousands of people that say the same thing. They've been through the same type of thing.
Wow.
Like people reach out to me and say, I do consulting. It's on my website. So people pay me to talk to me for an hour and just kind of make sense of what they're going through the same thing on a different level. Wow. But in the beginning, I was in complete denial. I was like, what do I do with this? And the thing was that the feeling of not taking it to my grave and not being able to have anybody to talk to. There was nobody to talk to, was really driving me crazy. It was worse than anything, not being able to talk to somebody in a constructive way to unpack it all. Because all of a sudden I got all these floods of. But before that, I had fragmented memories that didn't make sense. So I just brushed them off like that, whatever. When was I on a spaceship? When was I cargo engineer on a spaceship? I didn't have time for that. But when I learned that they could take you for 20 years and that, in fact, I went, oh my God, because I always remembered the first 30 minutes or so of the abduction. They didn't erase those memories. I always remembered that. I was always studying ufology, trying to make sense of what I did remember of the abduction. I remember being abducted, and I remember waking up the next morning feeling like I had been gone a long time and being a different person. Really, I had a huge personality change overnight.
But it was really only one night here on Earth, right? Like when you woke up, You were still 10. It was just, you had experienced this time warp or travel of 20 years, but it was really only one night here on Earth, right?
Yeah. So I'll put it like this. So it was a Wednesday. I went to school for the science fair, and the boy that didn't like me, his dad was Illuminati. His dad was a judge at the science fair, and he pointed me out to him on a Wednesday. On Thursday night, I was abducted. On Friday morning, I was home after 20 years in the same body. So there's an age regression process. So I would refer anybody to the William Tompkins account. He explains it quite well. Randy Kramer has some pretty good early videos with exopolitics where he explains the phenomenon, but William Tompkins really explains, in Selected by Extraterrestrials, of how the U.S., he worked in the Apollo program. And that's when I guess the U.S. was secretly acquiring this tech, the 20 and back tech. But I was taken on a Thursday night and lived for 20 years and put back Thursday night about 30 minutes later. So I woke up the next morning and it had felt like I was totally lost in my own home. I had a pile of toys in my room I had no interest in. I walked down, I hugged my mom. I hadn't seen her in 20 years to me.
Oh my gosh.
I went to school. I forgot my way around the school. I was lost, even though it was a small school and I went there my whole life. I didn't remember where the bathroom was. I was very disoriented. Yeah. I was a completely different person. I was 10 years old so we're talking in 82. So I didn't have access to any kind of cable TV or any internet or porn or anything. I had no idea what sexuality was. And all of a sudden I was attracted to adult females.
Because you had been older. Yeah.
Because I had been older. Exactly. Because because the day before I had a girlfriend.
That's a mind F, if you will.
Oh yeah. Well, it was, that's what happens is a lot of the emotional things don't get erased. Yeah. So they erase, what is it? Tangible memories, right. like sight and sound, like 3D memories. They erase your memories like that, but they don't erase the emotions because they're probably held somewhere else. Your emotions are probably in brain cells elsewhere in your body than
maybe that's a soul aspect, like the spiritual aspect that they can't fully control, which I'd like to get into.
That's right.
But really quickly, sorry, I'm really intrigued by the Illuminati thing because that's always just like a fun topic, like controversial, conspiracy theory. But like, I always think of the Illuminati as like, like the Rothschild, like the big families. But you're saying there was like a dad in your school of the kid, like they're just sprinkled around and that they're still involved in it. Like
No, he came to school for a short time, for about a year and a half. Okay. And when that happened, we all of a sudden got funding for the TAG program. And when he left, the funding was canceled. He was dropped out. We were in a Midwest school, not dirt poor and not wealthy area, but like a middle class, good school. And he was getting dropped off in a limousine every morning. And so everybody knew about him. He was, his dad was in town, I hate to give away, but he was in town negotiating for Coca-Cola with Domino's. So the Domino's world headquarters is in Ann Arbor, that was nearby where we live. And his dad was in town negotiating the Coca-Cola deal at the time.
So there's people that are like these bigwigs that are involved in the Illuminati though.
Yeah, they just popped in. Yeah. Right. And then, so I was sold off. In fact, when I was in Seattle, I was sold off. It was another billionaire and he was a practicing Satanist. I sat in and witnessed him doing satanic rituals. And that was one of the things that I'm trying to unword this correctly. Sure. Okay. In the beginning, when you work with a researcher, they want evidence. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got an I was abducted. I saw an ET. I saw a UFO, or I was abducted. Everybody's got one of them stories, but can you prove it? To a researcher, they want proof. They need you to give them something that nobody else knows, that somebody else can verify. Mm-hmm. So if you get what I mean, like they want you to say something that nobody knows about except for their other insiders. And what proved my story was that one of the researchers was an ex-practicing Satanist. And when I described the rituals, they said, man, there's no way he could have known that.
No one would know
there's
that.
No way,
right.
There's no way he would know that. Yeah. And especially at my age and my station in life, that I'm not a Satanist.
Sure.
And so that was one of the things that kept me on the radar and got me to the point where I am today, where I'm speaking about it publicly. So there were other things too. Like I always like to say that in 2015, I said that the Ceres, the Dawn probe was going to Ceres, and everybody saw the lights in the Okator crater, the big white spots on Ceres when the NASA probe was going there. And back then I said, those are salt deposits. That was a geyser, and it was salt that would snow back down. And those are meters thick of salt laying there on the crater. And I said this to several researchers. I did on a radio show in 2015 and 2016. And the Dawn probe said, no, that's carbonates and some other, they said it's a bunch of sulfur carbonates. So they said, we don't know what it is. And people asked me, Tony, do you want to retract your statement? Because NASA's saying it's probably not salt. And I said, no, that is salt. Trust me, there's a little bit of magnesium in there and it's salt. And there's tons of it.
Yeah.
Because the water goes up, it's a geyser, the water evaporates into space and the salt snows back down. So then in August of 2020, the Dawn probe results came in and they concluded that it was salt, briny salt. So that was something that, is it a super smoking gun for spaceships and ETs? No.
But like most people aren't going to know that. So that's.
But how are you going to know that? Right. I stuck to my guns and I got the email like, Tony, you were right all along. And it felt really good to have some kind of like actual validation like that. On top of hundreds of other things that have checked out. Like I found people like, I'm not even talking about Inyokern, the building codes at Inyokern, the programs. I found funding for CIA projects for the Project Real Flame. That was my first intake, my first assignment. I found the people in Seattle, the house in Seattle. I went back to. I have intimate knowledge of the island in Seattle. The history too, like there's a store there that turned into a restaurant that I remembered when it was a store, and I described that. I went on record. I went back, and it's a restaurant. It's like how do I know a small town's history that I've never been to or no one ever read about? Wow. So there's little things like that I had to.
Do you remember the name of the restaurant?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it right now.
Dang it. Because, okay, you're going to tell me offline.
Later on.
I live in the area. I'm going to go explore it.
Best hamburger you ever had. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. So
I had to prove it to myself. Otherwise, I would never, ever have the balls to speak about it publicly. Right. There's no way.
That's what Sherry Wild said too. She's like, I was like hoping I was wrong and that I was like schizophrenic or I was having like a mental episode, but you can't. And I guess that's what I always say. Like, why would people, maybe people want fame. Cool. Like have fun on YouTube, whatever, dude, but like, why would you risk your life, your career? Like, I'm sure you've lost friends. Like I've lost friends and, just for having people like you on my show. Like people are so close-minded. It's wild, but like, why would you not ruin your life, but like really disrupt your life and tell lies? Like, what do you have to gain? I guess that's why I just believe people.
It's really hard. I've lost some lifelong friends over it. I've lost family members, and we kind of avoid a lot of things in the family because of it. But in order for someone to believe what I'm talking about, for anybody listening, really for you or anybody else to believe what I'm talking about at this point where we are in history, you must unbelieve something fundamental to yourself. You have to unbelieve something that's very fundamental to your life. And it's in the beginning, I wanted to prove to everybody I was ready to fight about it. I wanted to fight. I said, no, this has happened to me and I'm going to prove to you, that this is what's going on and you need to listen to me. And what I learned very quickly, that's very damaging to do that to someone. To take somebody and make them believe in this stuff can be damaging. And there were people, it's not cool. So I only really talk to people that ask. And anybody that asks me about it, I'll answer the questions. Sure.
Totally.
But this is where we're going. This is one of the things. This is one of the truths that's going to come out in the near future about what's going on with mankind. Because the other thing is, let's cut to the very end of the gist of it all, is that not only are there ETs, but there are trillions of separate species of spacefaring ETs. So it's not just one group. It's not the Pleiadians and Arcturians. It's not the Greys and the reptiles. It's not that. Like there are literally at any given moment 10,000 races passing through our solar system. The cosmos are not only more accessible, and it's all instantaneous. We went from Ceres colony to Jupiter and then on to other galaxies and 4 or 5 stops and then back to Ceres colony in the same day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So in a 9 to 5 work day.
Yeah.
So that's how accessible space is once you get to a certain level of tech where they can make it's an Einstein-Rosen, it's a portal.
Yep.
And that's what space is really like. And that's what disclosure is really going to be, is that there aren't just a few races dealing with us. There are an endless supply of spacefaring nations, and they're formed into larger groups that sponsor species like ours to get into space and do business with each other, and trade of knowledge is really the name of the game. So that's the real revelation of what I'm trying to tell people is that we're conditioned to think that once we get into space, it's still like 10 years to get to the next star, and that's not, or across the galaxy, and that's not the case at all. Like, it's an endless number of doors.
It's just totally. And like, well said. I'm glad you brought that up. I guess, for all the haters, right? Just time will tell. Like, keep waiting, because even, for me, like, I never thought about the stuff. I honestly had no interest in like sci-fi. Like, I thought all that stuff was like so dumb. But then when I started digging into it and had my own awakening, I'm like, there's so many coincidences. It keeps coming up, like, Earth bases, underground, like all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know. But then when I hear these stories, I'm like, all right, like, I'm waiting, I'm listening, and I think even just look at like the tangible stuff, Elon Musk going to space, like this stuff seems new. It's not new. These technologies have been around. It's just finally coming out into the public, the mainstream view. Finally our government has, acknowledged the Pentagon. Like, yes, there are UFOs. This is a real thing. These are things they've known for so long. And all these people that believe in UFOs and stuff are like, finally, right? So I just encourage people, keep waiting, keep watching. It's going to continue to come out. More and more people like you are coming out with stories like this. And I think this is like obviously just my theory. I don't know as much about it, but do you think a large part of it too with these technologies is the free energy aspect? Because obviously it exists even with like Nikola Tesla and stuff. They had these technologies defying gravity. And so if we had free energy here, there would be no use for our, billions of dollar oil industry, which would topple the economy. Like, is that one of the reasons they're hiding all this?
I mean, look what's happening today. We have a war going on, and one of the main weapons of trade weapons is embargoing the oil.
Right.
So energy, you can by supplying energy, you can also withhold it.
Right.
It's kind of like your kids. You put your kids on an allowance, and they start misbehaving. I'm gonna cut your allowance.
Right.
That's what energy is, and it was the same for the Ceres colony. So that was the other thing, is that the ships were based on not on size, but on power output. So free energy. So, I can build a box. Imagine that if you can build a box that makes free energy, how much energy does it make? Is it enough to power Las Vegas? Or is it enough to power a home? Or is it enough to power your cell phone for free? Mm-hmm. You get what I mean? Like, that was really the challenge, is that it required exotic materials.
Right.
And the larger when you're talking about petawatts, like huge watts of power out of a small unit, that was still regulated much the same way that we have our energy regulated by ETs. There are places, there are rare elements that are hard to get in the cosmos. And so the Ceres colony was actually leasing generators of free energy generators, but they could have many small ones or one big one that would do the whole job. But the ships are based on power output. So the more power that a ship had from its free energy generator, I don't have a name for it, but the more it could output was how far it could go in one jump, or how far forward and backward in time it could go.
Right.
So it's still the name of the game is still the same in space, but we're still on the exhaustible stuff of it right now, the tech.
But it exists,
so I didn't want to go on a tangent.
We know about it, but I think it's kind of being hid from us, if you will.
Well, we're being controlled by it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us being controlled. So there's billions of people, and we're seeing it play out in real time.
Right now.
People volleying for control of us. And you see what big tech does. You see when it's not about what they show us, it's about what they don't let us say.
Right. All the censorships
right now,
happening.
That shows.
Mm-hmm. I know. Okay. Well, we could keep going on that, but I think people get it. It's crazy. Let's dive into the spiritual side, because I've watched a few interviews, and you've been on Gaia. Gaia is a very spiritual channel. I encourage people to watch Tony's interview on Gaia, and also there's another gentleman that was talking about secret space program, and I can't remember his name, but he talks about going up there too.
There's quite a few people that have come forward.
Yeah, Gaia is a really cool resource, though. Really well put together interviews, but the spiritual side, you don't always speak about on some of the interviews. So I'd really like to talk about that. And that's why I even am interested in talking to you, because I think there's a huge correlation. And when I started finding that out, I'm like, how did I not realize this, right? Like, there's a lot of guides and good angels and good ETs that I think are pulling for us. They want us to succeed, but they aren't allowed to interfere. And then there's a lot of bad ones too out there. There's a mixture. I think a lot of the technologies and telepathic communication, psychic abilities, there's so many advanced beings out there. I think we have it within us. We just haven't learned how to tap into it. We've also been conditioned here to not tap into it. Tell us whatever you want to tell us. It's such a broad topic, but like, how does spirituality relate to other beings in the planet? And I've also heard like we reincarnate from other planets. I've been told I came from the Ceres cluster or the Pleiadian cluster. So what is this?
Yeah, I think that people incarnate from much farther out. Everybody's a Pleiadian these days.
I know, they say
so
that.
When you get a reading, they're like, oh, you were definitely a Pleiadian. I'm like, really? You know, there's like 250,000 stars in the Pleiades.
Sure.
So where was I at there?
Right.
But it's not that I'm skeptical of that. It's just that I know that it's a much broader thing. Like when you incarnate, you could come from anywhere.
Yeah.
There are trillions of stars that we have no idea what the name is, and they have worlds around them. Something like 7 out of 10 stars has an Earth around it, an Earth-like world. 7 out of 10. So when you look at the sky, that's how many other Earths are up there with civilizations or possible civilizations going on. So that's the side. That's really, if once you get your mind around that, it's really easy to see how control mechanisms are necessary for certain governments and how they want to control everybody. The spirituality aspect of what I went through, I really learned a lot when I researched the first stop. So, it's in my book. So I want to mention my book, Ceres Colony Cavalier. It went out. I had 6 weeks of bestseller in its category, and it's on Amazon. It's on my website, TonyRodrigues.com. So the first book was basically just an account. It's really nice because when people ask me what happened to me, I don't have to unpack the whole 20 years. I can say, it's in my book. And it's kind of like, it's not every single detail, not even everything that I spoke about in all the interviews, but it's the story. It's from beginning to end of the story. My second book is going to cover the spirituality. So what I found was that in my first stop in Inyokern, I was in part of something called Project Real Flame. It was an offshoot of the funding for CIA through the Stanford Research Institute, Project Real Flame. And it was a remote viewing Project Stargate precursor. That dealt with a lot of really advanced consciousness type science that they were, and what they found was it was working very well with kids that were being brought to near-death experiences, kids that were trained through like an MK, like a trauma-based mind control into. The more I researched it, I went, oh, wow, it's just how I remember it. When I started research, it was one of those things where when I began to research, I went, oh, wow, that's real too. That's exactly how I remember it. And but what I found is that there's a lot of declassified information now in the CIA, the online declassified library, CIA.gov or something, CIA-declass.library.gov. But there's a lot of stuff. If you go in there and look up Grow Flame or Project Gateway, you can get a lot of documents about it. They put a great deal of funding and research into consciousness and remote viewing and weaponizing it. And it wasn't just remote viewing. They found that they can do, they can manipulate all kinds of things by having psychics do it. And they really broke down the science of it. So let me see. I have this here. There's a book called Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Isaac Bentov, was like a quantum scientist, quantum physics scientist in Russia. And it's a book about consciousness, but here it is. If I can hold this up. So what that does, that's like my favorite diagram ever. And it's in my show. I have a show that explains it. So what that says is that while you're thinking, well, you and I are in focus one right now because we're wide awake and we're talking to each other. We're mostly wide awake. But your electrons, you are a machine that has electricity running through you for your thoughts. Your electrons have a wave that kind of rolls, and the universe is a hologram. And so it basically is like a television, has pixels, and the smallest pixel is about a Planck distance. When you get into a higher focus of mind, so back to this, like the wavelength, instead of rolling like this, it goes in a spiky. And when that electron stops and changes direction because it gets to a high, it occupies less than a Planck distance and clicks out of the hologram, which is time-space. And you get to access everything. That's basically explains all psychic phenomena, all of it. And where we go when we die, there's several, it's extra dimensional. But once we click out of time-space, then you have access to the future and the past and all distances and everything all at once. And that's really the basis of psychic phenomenon. And that's the science behind it that they've hidden from us. They've known it since the 70s.
Right.
And they've hidden it, and they've taken it a long way. And what they did was in the Project Grill Flame, which morphed into Project Center Lane, which morphed into Project Gateway and then Stargate, they were actually able to heal people. They were able to hurt people. They weaponized it. They'd get 20, 30 guys together and they were using minerals that you take and binaural sounds that would hemisync the brain through the Monroe Institute technology. And they would get many people on one target, and with a load of other techniques, which I document all that in my, there are links to it in my website and through my Patreon show. Where I have because I found myself prescribing it to a lot of people. But they were able to weaponize it and actually kill people. They were actually able to remotely target people and stop hearts and things. And they're able to, soldiers that were wounded on missions, they were able to find where they are. They would actually heal people with it. So it's a very powerful technique. It's what we are made of, and we are purposely distracted and led the other way from what our real nature is, which is the ability to communicate with each other and with the rest of the universe outside of the time-space hologram. So, right, there's another mouthful, right? Like how do you? It hurts, Stephen. It's a lot to listen to, right? Just to speak it like that, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
But it's the truth.
Yeah, I know, and I've heard it before, and it's not a new concept, but still, it's like hard to hear because it's upsetting to know that, you know, we've been lied to and we've been trained to think a certain way. It's like humbling. You're like, there's just so much out there that we don't think about or know, and it sucks, you know. But I think, you know, part of our reason of picking to come here for our soul's purpose, it gets deeper, but I think we came here on purpose to work through that and help sort through. But I'm happy to see it actually being talked about more. Even just as simple as think about like Jesus. If you are like a strict Christian, there's nothing wrong with that. That could sound crazy. He's walking on water. Well, I've never seen someone walk on water. He was healing people. But these are things that mediums and spiritual clairvoyant people have been using, obviously, way back thousands of years ago to now. It's the same concept, the power of our mind and the thoughts and the telepathic. So yeah, if there's more advanced beings that can walk through a wall because they can, you know what I mean? Think Absolutely. It and do it. Like, it seems crazy, but it also doesn't seem crazy. It just, the power of our mind it's incredible. Yeah.
In the space programs, we were aware they had classifications of ETs. So, and they based it on words that beings could speak. In other words, a lower class of life is like you take your pets. A bird can speak a couple hundred words, a dog a couple dozen words, humans 150,000 to 250,000 words. We're a normal human. That's how they classified. They found that the more advanced life forms spoke more words. And in fact, once they went to a telepathic nature, It was a data. So there were ultra uber humans, meta humans, mega human, I'm making this up, but mega human. But there were life forms that once they got to certain advancement, they would communicate years worth of data in a few seconds.
And you just think it, and the other person can, or the other being just knows it. It's like receiving, and
entire years of memory.
They don't even have to speak.
And those beings also had the ability to manipulate matter and future and past events. So they were beings like Jesus, like, the stories that Jesus fed 5,000 people with all the fish and it turns out that there were ETs that could do that. Right. There are beings that could do that. They could manipulate matter and they could turn an apple or a baseball into an apple kind of thing by being able to manipulate the hologram on a molecular level.
Or like bending space. I've heard of stuff like that. Like, I mean, we don't think about it. It's hard to even, our brains almost don't have the capacity here to understand that, but that's why I think it's fascinating. And I'm making this up as a theory, but like, even just think about like angels and guardian angels. I started reading about different ETs, blue avians, and they have the bird-like feathers. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe somehow that was, someone had a reading, a biblical God spoken and wrote that in the Bible. And then that's the images of where these beings have wings. I mean, I don't know. I can't prove that, but you start looking at, you correlate things, and it's just the possibilities are endless. And I think so much of that stuff, the pyramids, these aren't new concepts. Watch the ancient civilization shows, but there were ETs on Earth with different technologies, and it's not a new concept. So it's really not that weird when you think about it.
We live in symbiosis with our lower life forms on Earth. So we found that out with the bees recently. recently. We had a scare of the bee population was going down. We found out very quick that if the bees are gone, we'd be gone right after.
Right.
Right. And the ETs of the higher, the ones you're speaking of, the more advanced ETs are in the same boat. So they live in a symbiosis with us as well. They want us to thrive so that they can thrive. It's just that simple. We don't want to get rid of the bees because there's a circle, the circle of life. There's a cycle of life. And so the ETs are the same way. And that's why the other thing that's another big lie that we're conditioned to. We're conditioned to, there's all along our entire life, we've been conditioned to several kind of fork in the roads that they're the wrong direction. And the one big lie is that we're the top of the food chain,
right?
That we're as good as it gets. And the fact is that we're not. There are beings that are far more advanced. They're humans like us that live for 1,000 years. They're telepathic and they speak more words than we do. They're the next level up, and there are humans above them. There are beings above them, and so on. There are like octaves in each thing. And then even between us, let's face it, some people behave more like animals than people, and are very criminal and are very violent, brutal,
instinctual.
They're right. They don't plan for very long. They live from day to day, and they behave. They're bad, and there's a lot of them. And they're not evil. What I'm saying is they're just not as advanced. They're not as developed.
Right.
And some people are, kept at a young age, emotionally or mentally for their whole life, and they just never get past. So they're closer, but like octaves in the existence. That's why there's reincarnation. Those people will learn from this lifetime, and when they are a human again, they'll be a little slightly better at it.
Right.
And then on the other end of the thing, we have people that are very saintly, very wise, very, very good leader. We have people that are very wise and seem to be very evolved people because they've been a human a few more times.
Sure.
And so it's like an octave. They're ready to move on to the next thing.
Sure.
And that's how what nature really is. And so the true nature of things have been hidden from us, and we've been given this sanitized, like kind of McDonald's quality spirituality away from what the elites have been using to get ahead and control us all along.
But they've been using it in a bad way.
Well, in a selfish way.
Right.
So, good and bad, I think, is also another false construct.
Right.
Because we're taught that the good guy's always good and the bad guy's always bad. And that's also not the case.
Sure.
From what I went through, as horrible as what I described with Seattle and as morally bankrupt as those people are, I mean, they give jobs to people. There are things that you could say they were people. Sure. They were liked by people,
and they had emotions,
they were people.
Right.
So they were just selfish. That's really ultimately what evil is 100% self-awareness versus, and then no awareness of anything else around you.
Lack of self-love and lack of love probably is, probably had a lack of love as growing up, but I mean, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Wow. Well,
it's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot, but I mean, again, it's like one of those things where it's like, I've heard it a lot. And so I'm not saying like, oh, this isn't a new concept to me. And I know a lot of people listening have probably followed some of this stuff. And some of you guys are hearing this for the first time and you're like, this is crazy. But I think more and more people are going to start coming out with stuff like this. And I don't know, you just start like noticing the coincidences. How many coincidences can there be? Like it just, things line up and.
Well, and then like you said, time will tell. Time, yep. People that have been skeptical to me, like, of course I've been attacked. There are YouTube channels devoted towards calling me names. I went public with my information, so I've taken my lumps.
Sure.
And I have the same, and even other whistleblowers. There are guys that go out there that they don't want anybody else to follow them or sure. be on stage next to them. Ufology is a very fragmented, form of a culture. It's very fragmented because the reality is that people are being interacted with by different ETs at different levels of technology for different reasons from all over the cosmos. There's not just one or two groups. Nobody has the same, very few people have the same exact event because there are that many different. But time is the greatest lie detector. And I say that all the time. I say that about me. I say that about, don't take anything that I'm telling you, verbatim. Time will tell. Time will. So far, I've been at it since 2015, so 7 years now. That since in May, since this began, I began talking to other people about what I remember. I've been at it for 7 years. And time has not dashed me apart. It's only supported me over time.
Yeah.
So not only me, but other people and this, our government that's lying to us about it, time is dashing them apart as well. So they've been covering it up since Roswell and since the 40s and 50s. And then now they're admitting that UAPs exist, like you said. Time is dashing that narrative apart, and it will continue to, because that's really how the truth works.
And I think that's why you just keep watching. I mean, hopefully, this will stay up, but like censorship, and you just watch for yourself. Don't take it from me. Don't take it from Tony. Don't take it from anybody. Find your own true answers, but just watch, see what's going on. Things will continue to come out. Technologies will come out. We all know there's been lots of lies in the last few years about stuff, control, stress, fear. Just pay attention, and you'll start noticing it's all correlated. And I think we really have to look within. We have that intuition. We have what we need inside of us. There's a lot of great people collaborating on the internet, podcasts, stuff's coming out. It's an exciting time to be alive. So yeah, time's going to tell.
Maybe the most exciting time. We are alive in a very pinnacle time in history for this world. So
I agree.
It's probably on purpose.
Yeah, I have somebody that follows the show had a question. If you don't mind me asking, he said, based on your experience, what is your perspective of what the soul is and what happens to us after death?
The soul is your consciousness, right? There's different, I call it awareness. I like to call it awareness. They call it chi, mana, your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call it. Your awareness goes to outside of time space, outside, because we're in a quantum hologram, which gives us the third dimension, 3 dimensions of measurement plus time. So 4 dimensions. When you die, you go outside of that, and you can access the front and, the future but you revert to like more of a 2-dimensional existence. And that's really what the universe is based on. And you just go on to your next, it's about momentum and growth. And when you get to a certain level, like I said, I'm a big fan of the law of one, and that explains how a lot of that works. And they equate a lot of the soul's growth to light colors. Like you emit light, we're luminous beings. And when you get done with one life, as you suffer in one life, you're rewarded in the next. And these are your lessons that you learn. Like, we all go through stations, and that's why we work together. It's like a band. We all work together. We all play our little part in the band. And so it's because this time I'm supposed to play this instrument and you're playing your instrument, and next time you're going to play a different instrument, and so on. And so that's what the soul is. And the reality is that we live in a quantum holograph that's more like a simulation, more like a choose your own adventure book than a reality like we see it as.
Matrix.
So when you die, you're outside of it. Yeah. When you die, you're outside of it. There's, I have a theory that, I could die, but somebody else could go back and relive my life and do it a completely different way. Back when I was born, it could be a whole nother soul that lives in the same exact life, because that's the real nature of time. Time doesn't evaporate. You can go forward and backward in it. So it's set. When you really look into relativity and a lot of the things, like when you look at great distances between worlds, you can actually, they said that you can actually travel on a world. If you could see another planet 20 light years away, if you could see a person standing on their grass in their yard 20 light years away, and then you moved on the high, you would see them go back in time.
Wow.
You would see their past. So time is like that. Time is more like a story, like a choose your own adventure book. And it's very malleable compared to what we believe it is. We are not equipped to correctly think about or theorize about time and the way that it works. So your soul is something that escapes that. And there are ways, like I said, I've been working on it. It's going to be probably a 4th book of mine. I'm making like a manual, a guide to go into higher focus states and use working off of what I learned from the CIA documents and the Monroe Institute and a few other things. I'm making a manual on that because I've kind of rediscovered what they put me through, and you can manipulate, your future and past. You can go into higher focus states with intention. I have a group about it on my Patreon. It's really been taking off lately. That seems to be what everybody's interested in. And it's a very integral part of human nature. Like, these are things you do when you sleep. and we spend quite a bit of our life sleeping. Your subconscious escapes, and you click out. That brain wavelength of really high, clicking out happens mostly while we're sleeping naturally. So that's why sleep is so important, because you're going into the future and securing permission.
Yeah, and dreams can be another reality, and have messages, people astral, travel and astral dreams. I mean, there's a lot with sleep, and most abductions seem to happen. A lot of them, Sherry Wild, when she was sleeping too. It's an interesting phenomenon. Yeah.
Well, and then a lot of the abduction tech is that they can park a robot ship. So a lot of the craft are robots, or drones. Yeah. They park a drone ship, and that has the ability to artificially induce sleep for everybody in the home or in the area. So everybody goes to sleep, and there's no witnesses. That's why they don't. And then they can come in and grab you, and they portal out, and do whatever they're going to do, and then everybody wakes up the next morning going, "What, did something happen? I don't know."
I feel weird, yeah.
So that's kind of how they get away with it. That's why it's people want hard evidence, and I always say, if we send our special forces into the Amazon to abduct these Aboriginal people that still live there, that are still living, in the Amazon, these tribes that have not had contact with humanity. Just our special forces, we could get in and out and abduct them and put them back. No one would know.
Right.
We have that kind of technology. And now we're talking about technology that is potentially millions of years old abducting us. There's no way we're going to catch them.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to stop them or catch them. It's just not.
Wow. Crazy stuff. Very cool. Well, I mean, we could chat for hours. This is incredible stuff, but I mean, thank you for sharing. Thank you for your courage. I mean, I know it's not easy. You've been doing it for a while, but like your initial, choice to come out and speak is crazy cool. If people just take this as an interesting conversation, like it's like a Star Wars episode, then cool, be entertained. Or if you believe it or you're intrigued, it opens up your mind. That's great too. But I just keep hearing the same type of stories. It just seems like it's pretty common, and I don't know, man. It's wild. Thank you.
We're moving toward a disclosure. Yeah. They're going to have to tell us sooner or later.
Yep. And they do. They always sprinkle little things in, right? And I just think it's going to keep coming in all aspects of. There's more out there than we know. There's cures for cancer. There's cure for COVID. There's free technology, you know what I mean? There's free, it's there. All of it's there. It's just a matter of time. So we'll watch, we'll hang out. Actually, I do have one more question. Have you, bouncing around, but have you experimented or do you channel? Can you channel with ETs, or have you gotten anything since you've been back?
So I haven't got into that part of it yet. Like I said, I have a group called Tier 3 on my Patreon, and we're kind of in the early stages of things. Channeling is what they had me do in Peru from that program early on in the early 80s. I was in Peru. It's in my book. You know what I mean? Like at this point at the end of the interview, I'll just say, refer to my book. Read
the book. Okay.
Yeah. I have a website, TonyRodrigues.com. Okay. The book is Ceres Colony Cavalier. Cool. It's on Amazon. It's easy to find.
Okay.
And, but channeling is something that is, I don't want to call it dangerous, but it's something that it's like another version, it's another layer, it's another level up from what I've been working on, because I'm just trying to change, slightly change things for the better for us and try to aid and push disclosure forward is kind of my goal. Yep. Channeling is something that people that are profoundly psychic and can really go into everybody's kind of got a psychic abilities. And some people are very profound at it, and they kind of always have one foot out the door. Right. If you get to know these people, I was very shocked when I always believed in it, not skeptical at all. But when I met people that were profoundly psychic, I was very shocked at how affluent and what their abilities really were. I mean, some people are very gifted, and so that's kind of what channeling requires to do it in a safe way, because you're talking about actually being, in a way, possessed.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had just gotten, not that you've been trying, if you just had anything come through, but.
Well, okay, so the other thing about channeling is that was one of the base technologies that they were doing. Like I refer to, when I say that I sat in on satanic rituals in the beginning in Seattle, I think it was less of a religion and more of a technology. And they were using channeling to get information and get ahead with beings. They were purposely channeling beings and trying to get information. And we're talking about guys that were billionaires. So they were doing business this way. They were channeling and getting information. And you look at how some billionaires just happen to get everything right every time they take a wild guess, it pans out and they profit. It's like, this is what they're doing. They're using this. It's a technology. It's a disgusting religion to us, which would appall the normal person and guess what? Make you not want to try it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it locks the door to it, but really it's a technology and they're channeling and learning ways to get ahead. And that's how they one more feather in their cap of how they've been able to run things for thousands of years. They've been at it. So channeling is kind of that thing. And the other thing is it has to be established, or you don't know who you're going to channel or if they're going to give you damaging information or beneficial information.
Well, that's why I always say you have to ask for, I believe, like ask for protection, and only like the highest of good can come in. That's just something that I would, if I play around. A
lot of people, it's very smart to do every kind of meditation.
You got to protect yourself.
Some kind of like a protection prayer. Yep.
Cool. But that was a huge awakening for me. Like, just, I've been spiritually, I think, like into all this stuff. But then when I started realizing like the political and the space is all correlated, I was just like, oh my God. Like, so, I mean, I'm super familiar with a lot of the stuff you talk about, but it's just still like hard to comprehend. There's like bases on planets. It's like, what the actual F? Like, how did we not know this? But
there was 250,000 people inside Ceres.
So are they inside it because like we can't, because like obviously we can see other planets with satellites. Is it for that reason, like Mars?
No, for the air. There's no air, so it's inside.
They have to be inside. Okay.
Yeah.
And there are people on Earth too, right?
And they found inside the Earth. Well, what it is they found some other species built the caverns and built the infrastructure there, and they just moved in. It was abandoned, and they moved in and started to build. There are European cities. They built replica European cities inside of it.
And the Earth?
Artificial in Ceres.
Oh, okay.
On the Ceres planetoid.
Okay.
There's artificial gravity. There was air. There are machines that make air, and I mean like a lot of air. And there's life there. There's people.
What's the point of them being
Germans.
in the middle of the Earth when the exterior obviously has a lot more resource? Like, you know what I mean? Trees and air. Like, why would they be in the middle of the Earth?
On the Earth here? Well, because in case something happens, number one, we don't know. We can't. They're outside of our jurisdiction. There's no laws for them.
Okay.
What are you going to do to them when they decide to say, we're going to draft everybody or change the laws? Like, okay, murder is okay for us, or this is okay. Prearranged marriage, like people are being forced to marriage. They're doing eugenics. They're doing genetic modification. They're doing things that we have laws against.
They're doing that in the middle of the Earth?
They have bases that they just do down there. And there are other species living down inside the Earth. There are huge caverns the size of states. These massive places.
Good and bad, or just?
Yeah. Well, what's good and bad?
Well, okay, sure. In our eyes.
They don't all get along, and they don't all care about us. Some of them care about us and some of them don't. But they're down there living their life, and they're uninterrupted. There's nothing we can do to interrupt them. So they're just carrying on business however they like. And,
Did you go there, or you were just shown that?
We went in the Catarina Mountains in South America. There's a place in the Catarina Mountains that we went in, and we would trade cargo. we went down in a cavern, but you could see sunlight from the entrance. So we were just inside the surface, and we would meet with ships that came up, and we would trade cargo there. So we met them. We did business with them. So, I mean, they're living their life. And you got to think, if you look around the Earth, there's not too many places you can go and do your own thing.
Right.
You have to build a boat and go out to sea to have, your own set of law, your own set of rules. And I guess now they have, they just passed it. Congress passed it last year or the year before. They can have techno cities, and they can suspend constitutional law if you pay the money. $80 million, $85 million. And it has to be at least 5,000 acres, and you can make your own laws that are outside of the Constitution, techno cities. And they say the reason that Congress is because it's to develop new technologies. They're going to do the Neuralink, they're going to do obviously genetic modify. It'll be the transhuman stuff. They're going to modify people, and they're going to quickly outpace us.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to be computer people. So,
Well,
you know, it's real.
Yeah.
That's all real shit. That's not, you know, that's not a sci-fi to experience that.
Yeah. Wow. What an experience. I mean, I know it was hellish, but also like how cool for you to be able to tell people like me that believe in it, but like haven't seen it, like all this stuff, like it wild.
Well, that goes on out there. And then, so I'm
and you always wonder like why you, right? Why Sherry Wild? Why Corey Good? But like you said, you had that interaction with that kid. I wonder why they flagged you though, because you knew that the dad was Illuminati, or I
was just a cocky kid. I was just treated him like shit.
Okay.
I was a cocky kid, and it was a punishment.
Okay.
And, you know, a recent Dr. Sal said he's worked with a lot of people that have contact, and it was in the form of a punishment like that. It's something they do. If you're in their life and you piss them off, they go, okay, we'll throw them in there and see how you like that. Believe me, when I woke up the next morning, that Friday morning, I was not cocky. And I never really was again. Right. I was really, self-esteem problems. I was a slave.
People, now you can help, which is really cool. And you're trying to help disclose. That's amazing. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll have to end it now. Maybe we'll get to chat again sometime, but thank you for being on the show. Thank you for your story. And thank you for, your work on the disclosure. I'm excited to see what will happen in the next X however many years. Stuff's just going to keep coming out. So
we're all in for a bumpy ride, it looks like. So it's like we're all in the same boat here.
Totally.
So these are birth pains for something hopefully much better than what we've had. So
yeah, I agree.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll list Tony's information, his website and everything in the show notes. So go check his books out and his website. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for listening. You can find me on Instagram at RealLaurenLive and my website at Lauren.live.